Story number 1. My city had a problem with loud motorcycles and vehicles. The noise was a nuisance to residents and businesses, and it was also a safety hazard. In an attempt to deter the noise, the city put up decibel meters that displayed how loud your engine was. The meters were similar to those signs that read your speed and display it to you. However, the decibel meters had the opposite effect of what was intended. Instead of deterring people from making noise, they encouraged it. People would pull up to the meters and rev their engines as loud as they could, trying to see who could get the highest decibel count. The city took the decibel meters down within a week. They realized that the meters were actually making the problem worse. Story number 2. I work in a manufacturing plant, and we get paid piece rate. This means that the more I produce, the more I get paid. We also have a base hourly pay rate of $10 per hour. But this is only paid if we don't make enough money from piece rate. When we train new employees, we get paid $15 per hour. This is to compensate us for having to slow down or stop our machines to teach the new employees. The big boss came in last week and decided that we would no longer be paid training pay. He said that if we're working with someone, we should be making more than $15 per hour anyway. We were all pretty upset about this. We have been doing a lot of training lately, and it was a big part of our income. A few of us got together and decided that we wouldn't train anyone anymore if we weren't getting paid for it. We would teach the new employees enough to get them started, but we would leave the rest of the training to the designated trainers. The designated trainers are two people who are paid $17.50 per hour. They don't have to produce anything, so they're happy to do the training. The big boss was not happy with us. He called us in and told us that we were being lazy and entitled. He said that we should be grateful for the opportunity to train new employees. We told him that we were not being lazy and that we were simply trying to make a fair wage. We said that we were willing to train new employees, but only if we were paid for it. The big boss eventually relented and agreed to pay us training pay. The policy only lasted 4 days. Story number 3. My buddy told me about a happy hour promotion that a bar near his campus ran. The special was that all beers were 50 cents each, but the promotion would end as soon as someone went to the bathroom. The first few weeks went without incident. People would just hold it in until they got home. But as the promotion became more popular, people started to get creative. Some people started wearing adult diapers. Others would try to sneak off to the bathroom without being seen. And there were even a few people who tried to pee in corners or trash cans. The bar eventually canceled the promotion after it became clear that people were willing to do anything to avoid being that guy who ruined it for everyone. Story number 4. At my old job, someone abused the lunch policy. They would take long lunches, go out to eat, and not come back until hours later. This was unfair to the rest of us, who were trying to be productive. The boss decided to crack down on the lunch policy. He made everyone start texting him when they started and finished their lunch breaks. He also wanted to know where they were going and what they were eating. One guy, let's call him John, decided to take this as an opportunity to rebel. He started texting the boss every detail of his lunch break. He would tell him the exact time he left his desk, the name of the restaurant he was going to, what he ordered, and how much it cost. He even included a picture of his food. The boss was not amused. He told John to stop, but John refused. He said that he was just following the rules. The boss eventually gave up and stopped bothering John. But the other employees thought it was hilarious. They started calling John the lunch police. Story number 5. I worked for a marketing firm that had a very strict break policy. You had to be back at your desk by the second your break was over, or you would be locked out of the building. If you were locked out, you would not be allowed to take a break the next day. I knew that this policy was illegal in New York State, but I didn't want to cause trouble, so I decided to follow the policy to the letter. I would set a timer for the exact length of my break, and I would be back at my desk at the exact second the timer went off. I would even clock out and clock back in again, just to be sure. The boss was not happy. He thought I was being petty and annoying, but he couldn't do anything about it because I was technically following the rules. After a few weeks, the boss got tired of me. He realized that he couldn't keep locking me out of the building, so he changed the policy. Now, we're allowed to take our breaks whenever we want, as long as we're back in the office within an hour. I'm glad that I stood up for myself. I knew that the policy was illegal, and I wasn't going to let the boss get away with it. I'm also glad that he eventually changed the policy. It's important for companies to be fair to their employees, and this was a clear case of unfair treatment. Story number 6. The 1994 Caribbean Cup was a strange tournament. The organizers had decided to change the rules for extra time. If the score was tied at the end of regular time, the first goal scored in extra time would win the match, and it would count as 2 goals for the purposes of qualification. This rule had a strange effect on the match between Barbados and Grenada. Barbados needed to win by 2 goals to qualify for the next round. If they won by 1 goal, Grenada would qualify instead. The match was tied 2-2 with a few minutes to go. Barbados knew that if they scored another goal, they would win the match by 1 goal and be eliminated. So, they deliberately scored an own goal to make the score 2-2. Grenada realized what Barbados had done, and they did the same thing. They scored an own goal to make the score 3-2. This meant that Barbados had won the match, but they had only won by 1 goal. So Grenada qualified for the next round instead. The match was a bizarre spectacle, and it showed how the organizers' strange rule had backfired. The rule was intended to encourage teams to play more attacking football in extra time, but it had the opposite effect. Instead, it encouraged teams to score own goals and try to lose the match by the smallest possible margin. The rule was eventually abandoned after the 1994 tournament. It was clear that it was not working as intended, and it was causing more problems than it was solving. Story number 7. In the early 1990s, Domino's Pizza introduced a new guarantee. All pizzas would be delivered in 30 minutes or less, or your pizza was free. The company called it the 30-minute guarantee. The guarantee was a huge success at first. Customers loved the idea of getting their pizza quickly and easily, and Domino's sales soared. However, the guarantee also had some unintended consequences. One of the biggest problems was that delivery drivers were under a lot of pressure to get pizzas to customers on time. They would often speed and take risks on the road in order to make the delivery deadline. This led to an increase in car accidents involving Domino's delivery drivers. In 1993, a Domino's delivery driver in Florida was killed in a car accident while trying to make a delivery on time. This incident led to a public outcry, and Domino's eventually decided to modify the 30-minute guarantee. The company changed the guarantee to say that pizzas would be delivered in a reasonable amount of time. This change was made to reduce the pressure on delivery drivers and to make the guarantee safer for everyone involved. The 30-minute guarantee was a bold marketing move by Domino's, but it ultimately proved to be too risky. The company learned a valuable lesson from the experience, and it has since taken steps to make its delivery system safer for everyone involved. Story number 8. I work at a company that has a strict no-alcohol policy. This means that I cannot begin work within 10 hours of having had a drink. This is a safety measure to ensure that employees are not impaired while working. One day there was a staff shortage and my boss called me and asked me to come in right away. I was at home, relaxing with a beer. I didn't want to let my boss down, so I cracked open another one and headed to work. I knew that I was breaking the rules, but I didn't think it would be a big deal. I was only going to be working for a few hours, and I didn't feel drunk. I got to work and started my shift. I was feeling fine at first, but after a few hours, I started to feel the effects of the alcohol. I was feeling tired and my mind was foggy. I knew that I shouldn't have called my boss and told him that I couldn't work, but I didn't want to let him down. I ended up working for the full shift, but it was a struggle. I was constantly making mistakes and I could barely keep my eyes open. I was so relieved when my shift was over. I learned my lesson that day. I will never drink before work again. It's not worth the risk. Story number 9. I work at a company that has a strange infraction system. If you're a minute late, that's half a point. If you're up to 4 hours late, that's also half a point. So if you're going to be late, you might as well be 4 hours late because the penalty is the same. I know what you're thinking. You're saying that I would miss 4 hours of pay if I'm 4 hours late, but that's not the case at my company. We have a weird policy that allows us to fill in missing time with paid time off, PTO, at the end of the work week. We also don't get sick days. If we're sick, we have to take PTO. And even then, we're likely to get points because we called in less than 24 hours before our shift starts. It's not an issue if you get half a point and don't get another one for 6 months because the first one will have fallen off by then. But if you get 2 points in 6 months, you're put on a performance improvement plan. And if you get 3 points in 6 months, you're fired. I think the point system is unfair. It doesn't take into account the severity of the infraction. Being a minute late is not the same as being 4 hours late, and being sick is not the same as calling in because you're hungover. I've talked to my boss about the point system, but he doesn't seem to care. He says that the point system is there to discourage tardiness and absenteeism, but I think it's just a way to punish employees for things that are beyond their control. I'm not sure what to do. I don't want to get fired, but I also don't want to be penalized for being late or sick. I guess I'll just have to be more careful about my time. Story number 10. In the Middle Ages, English law in Wales set the death penalty for stealing a sheep. This was a very harsh punishment, and it led to some Welshmen resorting to a rather creative legal loophole. If a Welshman was caught stealing a sheep, he could claim that he was making love to it. This was a lesser crime, and it only carried a penalty of a fine or imprisonment. The English authorities were not amused by this loophole, but they were powerless to do anything about it. The Welshmen had found a way to get around the law, and they were not going to give it up easily. As a result of this loophole, the Welshmen gained a reputation as sheep shaggers. This reputation is still around today, even though it is not based on reality. In reality, there is no evidence that Welshmen are more likely to have sex with sheep than people from any other nationality. The stereotype is likely based on a combination of factors, including the harsh punishment for sheep stealing and the Welshman's reputation for being independent and rebellious. The stereotype of Welshmen as sheep shaggers is harmful and offensive. It perpetuates negative stereotypes about Welsh people, and it contributes to the normalization of sexual abuse against animals. It is important to remember that stereotypes are often based on ignorance and prejudice. They should not be used to judge individuals or groups of people. Story number 11. When a daycare started charging a small fine for parents who picked up their children late, the new policy actually caused more late pickups. This is because the parents were originally worried that a late pickup would be a significant burden on the daycare employees. But because the fine was so small, only a few dollars, they decided that it must not be a big inconvenience for the daycare. The parents reasoned that it would be cheaper to pay the fine than to pay for an extra hour of daycare. As a result, the daycare had to deal with even more late pickups. This is an example of a negative unintended consequence. The daycare's intention was to discourage late pickups, but the new policy actually made the problem worse. The same thing can happen with alcohol bans at college football games. When alcohol is banned, fans may load up before going into the stadium. This can lead to increased intoxication problems because the fans are drinking more alcohol in a shorter period of time. Fans may also be more likely to engage in risky behavior, such as fighting or driving under the influence. This is because they are already intoxicated and they may not be thinking clearly. This is why it is important to think carefully about the unintended consequences of any policy change. Sometimes, the solution to a problem can actually make the problem worse. In the case of the daycare, the fine was not a big enough deterrent to prevent late pickups. The daycare may need to consider increasing the fine or implementing other strategies to discourage late pickups. In the case of alcohol bans at college football games, the ban may need to be accompanied by other measures, such as increased security and public awareness campaigns. Story number 12. I worked at a warehouse that had a policy of optional overtime. The supervisor told me that if I didn't stay for overtime, everyone else would have to stay even later. I didn't mind the extra hours, so I usually stayed. One day, a new hire mentioned to the boss that he was hoping to get out by 6 p.m. The boss apparently thought that us leaving early was a common occurrence and decided that no one was going to be leaving early anymore. This change in policy had a negative impact on productivity. Everyone was working their butts off to get out early, but we were failing every day. Eventually, we gave up and just started working at a slower pace. The boss didn't realize that us leaving early was actually a motivator. It gave us something to work towards, and it made us feel like our hard work was appreciated. When he took away our ability to leave early, he took away our motivation. As a result, productivity went down and overtime went up. Everyone was worse off. This story is a reminder that incentives matter. When people are motivated, they are more productive. When they are not motivated, they are less productive. In this case, the boss's decision to take away the incentive of leaving early backfired. He thought he was being fair, but he was actually making things worse. The next time you are in a position to motivate people, Think about what will make them want to work hard. What are their goals? What are they passionate about? Once you know what motivates them, you can create a system that rewards them for their hard work. Story number 13. I worked at Macy's during the Christmas season, and I quickly learned that it was very difficult to find an employee at the register. I asked my manager about this, and he told me that they don't allow employees to stand at the register because it's intimidating. I was surprised by this, but I soon realized that he was right. When there are long lines of customers, it can be intimidating to be the only one standing at the register. Customers may feel like they're being rushed or that they're not being given enough attention. This policy also has the unintended consequence of making it difficult for customers to make purchases. If they can't find an employee at the register, they may give up and go to another store. I think Macy's should reconsider their policy of not allowing employees to stand at the register. It's not fair to customers, and it's not good for business. Story number 14. I work as a maintenance worker for a high-rise block of flats. There is a sign saying that anything left in the communal areas will be removed due to it being a fire risk. However, people still dump their unwanted items there, such as fridges and sofas. By law, we have to remove this waste, but it is a lot of work, and it is not always safe. I have asked my management for help, but they have not been very supportive. They say that they do not have the resources to put up cameras or hire more staff. This is frustrating for me, because I am the one who has to deal with the mess. I am also worried about the fire risk. I have reported the problem to the council, but they have not taken any action. I am sorry for the crappy human beings who are fly tipping in my block. They are putting everyone at risk. I am also sorry for the British taxpayers who are paying me to clean up their mess. I hope that one day this problem will be solved. In the meantime, I will continue to do my best to keep my block safe. I understand that you are frustrated and angry. It is not fair that you have to deal with this problem. I hope that you will continue to report the fly tipping to the council and to your management. Maybe if enough people complain, they will finally take action. Story number 15. The British government was concerned about the number of venomous cobra snakes in Delhi. They decided to offer a bounty for every dead cobra snake. This was a successful strategy at first, as many snakes were killed for the reward. However, enterprising people soon realized that they could make money by breeding cobras. They would then release the snakes into the wild, so that they could be killed and collected for the bounty. When the government realized what was happening, they scrapped the bounty program. This caused the cobra breeders to release their now worthless snakes into the wild. As a result, the wild cobra population further increased. This is an example of a negative unintended consequence. The government's intention was to reduce the number of cobras, but the bounty program actually made the problem worse. This is not the only time that a bounty system has backfired. In the United States, for example, a bounty was once offered for wolves. This led to the widespread killing of wolves, which almost wiped them out in some parts of the country. Bounty systems can be effective in some cases, but they can also be easily abused. It is important to carefully consider the potential consequences before implementing a bounty system. Story number 16. In French Indochina, there was a major problem with rodents eating supplies and spreading disease. The colonial authorities decided to pay people per rat killed rather than per hour worked, in the hopes that this would motivate the locals to kill as many rats as possible. However, the locals had a different idea. They realized that they could make more money by breeding rats and then killing them for the bounty. As a result, the rat population actually increased. This is an example of a negative unintended consequence. The authorities' intention was to reduce the rat population, but their actions actually had the opposite effect. This is not the only time that a well-intentioned policy has backfired. In the United States, for example, there are many dry counties where the sale of alcohol is prohibited. However, these dry counties often have higher rates of alcoholism and drunk driving than wet counties. This is because people who want to drink alcohol will still find a way to do so, even if it means driving to another county. Dry counties can also create a black market for alcohol, which can be dangerous and unregulated. It is important to carefully consider the potential consequences of any policy before implementing it. Sometimes, the best intentions can lead to unintended consequences that are worse than the problem they were trying to solve.